Hello everyone, good afternoon. Welcome to lecture number 11 in our program on American literature. My name is Fuzi Slisli. Today we will be doing an analysis of William Faulkner's A Rose for Emily. This is a story we looked at in our previous lecture, but in the previous lecture we mostly looked at the events of the story and did a basic analysis of the characters and the events. Today we will look a little bit deeper into the themes and the techniques, the literary techniques used in this story. So let's start first of all with the themes of A Rose for Emily. The first one, the first major theme in this story is tradition versus change. Through the mysterious figure of Emily Grierson, William Faulkner conveys the struggle that comes from trying to maintain tradition in the face of widespread radical change. Jefferson, the city, the town of Jefferson, is at a crossroad, embracing a modern, more commercial future, while still perched on the edge of the past, from the faded glory of the Grierson home to the town cemetery where anonymous Civil War soldiers have been led to rest. So it's a town that still has a leg in the past, but it's starting to have a leg in the future now. Emily herself is a tradition, steadfastly staying the same over the years despite many changes in her community. She is in many ways a mixed blessing. As a living monument to the past, she represents the traditions that people wish to respect and honor. However, she is also a burden and entirely cut off from the outside world, nursing eccentricities that others cannot understand. Emily lives in a timeless vacuum and world of her own making, refusing to have metallic numbers affixed to the side of her house. This is when people started having house numbers. She refused to have those metallic numbers affixed, attached to the side of her house. When the town receives modern mail service, she's out of touch with the reality that constantly threatens to break through her carefully sealed perimeters. Garages and cotton gins have replaced the grand antebellum homes. The alderman tried to break with the unofficial agreement about taxes once forged between Colonel Sartoris and Emily. These are the new politicians in the town. Colonel Sartoris had a deal with Emily that she was not going to pay taxes, if you remember. And then after he died, the new politicians, the aldermen, want to break with this agreement. And they say, now it's time Miss Emily starts paying taxes. This new and younger generation of leaders brings in Homer's company to pave the sidewalks. Although Jefferson still highly regards traditional notions of honor and reputation, the narrator is critical of the old men in their Confederate uniforms who gather for Emily's funeral because they're shadows from the past. For them, as for her, time is relative. They're not conscious of the passing of time. The past is not a faint glimmer, but an ever-present, idealized realm. Emily's macabre bridal chamber is an extreme attempt to stop time and prevent change, although doing so comes at the expense of human life. Another important theme in William Faulkner's A Rose for Emily is the power of death. Death is everywhere in the story, from the beginning until the end. The story is about death. Death hangs over a rose for Emily. From the narrator's mention of Emily's death at the beginning of the story, through the description of Emily's death-haunted life, to the foundering of tradition in the face of modern changes. In every case, death prevails over every attempt to master it. This is a town that's trying to control death and preserve a tradition from the past that's pretty much dead. But death wins every time. Emily is a fixture in the community, gives in to death slowly. The narrator compares her to a drowned woman, a bloated and pale figure left too long in the water. In the same description, he refers to her small, spare skeleton. She is practically dead, but still on her feet. Emily stands as an emblem of the Old South, as a symbol of the Old South, an Old South that's gone and dead. A grand lady whose respectability and charm rapidly decline through the years, much like the outdated sensibilities the Griersons represent. The death of the old social order will prevail, despite many townspeople's attempt to stay true to the old ways. Emily attempts to exert power over death by denying the fact of death itself. She refuses to accept that her father died and refuses to allow the town to bury him for 3 days, if you remember. Her bizarre relationship to the dead bodies of the men she has loved. Her necrophilia. Necrophilia is the attachment or the love for corpses, for dead corpses. And Emily is necrophiliac. She shows tendencies or strong tendencies of necrophilia. So her necrophilia is revealed first when her father dies. Unable to admit that he has died, Emily clings to the controlling paternal figure whose denial and control became the only yet extreme form of love she knew. She gives up his body only reluctantly. When Homer dies, Emily refuses to acknowledge it once again, although this time she herself was responsible for bringing about the death. She killed him, right? But she refuses to accept that he was dead and keeps him in her bedroom for years. In killing Homer, she was able to keep him near her. However, Homer's lifelessness rendered him permanently distant. Emily and Homer's grotesque marriage reveals Emily's disturbing attempt to fuse life and death, to fuse the past into the present. However, death ultimately triumphs and wins. There is a number of motifs in the story also. These are things that reoccur and happen again and again. And most important among them is the motive of watching. Emily is the subject of the intense, controlling gaze of the narrator and residents of Jefferson. They are constantly watching her. In lieu of an actual connection to Emily, instead of having an actual connection with her, visiting her, having relationships with her, they just sit back and watch her. So instead of an actual connection to Emily, the townspeople create subjective and often distorted interpretations of the woman they know little about. They attend her funeral under the guise of respect and honor, but they really want to satisfy their lurid curiosity and the town's most notable about the town's most notable eccentric. She's an eccentric lady, They're so curious about her and her life, and that's what really attracts them to her funeral. They say it's, you know, they do it for respect and honor, but in reality, they go to the funeral to satisfy their curiosity. One of the ironic dimensions of the story is that for all the gossip and theorizing, no one guesses the perverse extent of Emily's true nature. No one realizes that she's committed murder. Not only that, but she's been practicing necrophilia for years. For most of the story, Emily is seen only from a distance, by people who watch her through the windows or who glimpse her in her doorway. The narrator refers to her as an object, an idol. This pattern changes briefly during her courtship with Homer Barron, when she leaves her house and is frequently out in the world with Homer. However, others spy on her just as avidly, and she is still relegated to the role of object, a distant figure who takes on character according to the whims of those who watch her. In this sense, the act of watching is powerful because it replaces an actual human presence with a made-up narrative that changes depending on who is doing the watching. No one knows the Emily that exists beyond what they can see, what they can watch, and her true self is visible to them only after she dies and her secrets are finally revealed. Another recurring motif in the story is dust. A pall of dust hangs over the story, underscoring the decay and decline that figure so prominently. I mean, the dust represents the decay, the dead, you know. When a house nobody lives in a house for a long time, it's dusty, right? Dust lives in places where there is no life, right? The dust throughout Emily's house is a fitting accompaniment to the faded lives within. When the alderman arrived to try and rescue Emily's annual tax payment, the house smells of dust and disuse. As they seat themselves, the movement stirs dust all over them, and it slowly rises, rolling about their thighs and catching the slim beam of sunlight entering the room. The house is a place of stasis, where regrets and memories have remained undisturbed. In a way, the dust is a protective presence. The alderman cannot penetrate Emily's murky relationship with reality. The layers of dust also suggest the cloud of obscurity that hides Emily's true nature and the secrets that her house contains. In the final scene, the dust is an oppressive presence that seems to emanate from Homer's dead body. The dust, which is everywhere, seems even more horrible here. Symbols. There's a number of symbols in the story. The most important is Emily's house itself, and Emily herself is a symbol. Emily's house, like Emily herself, is a monument. A monument, like we say, the pyramids are a monument in Egypt. So Emily and her house were a monument to the Old South, the only remaining emblem of a dying world of Southern aristocracy. The outside of the large square frame house is lavishly decorated. The cupolas, spires, and scrolled balconies are the hallmark of a decadent style of architecture that became popular in the 1870s in the second half of the 19th century. By the time the story takes place, a lot has changed. The street and neighborhood, at one time affluent, pristine, privileged, beautiful, rich, now have lost their standing as the realm of the elite. Now this neighborhood is not rich, is not beautiful anymore. The house is in some ways an extension of Emily. It bears its stubborn and coquettish decay, as the story says, to the town's residents. It is a testament to the endurance and preservation of tradition, but now seems out of place among the cotton wagons, gasoline pumps, and other industrial trappings that surround it. Just as the South's old values are out of place in a changing society. Emily's house also represents alienation, mental illness, and death. It is a shrine to the living past. And the sealed upstairs bedroom is her macabre trophy room where she preserves the man she would not allow to leave her. She kills him and preserves him in her room. It's a macabre trophy. As when the group of men sprinkled lime along the foundation to counteract the stench, the bad smell of rotting flesh, the townspeople skulk along the edges of Emily's life and property. The house, like its owner, is an object of fascination for them. They project their own lurid fantasies and interpretations onto the crumbling edifice and mysterious figure inside. Emily's death is a chance for them to gain access to this forbidden realm and confirm their wildest notions and most sensationalistic suppositions about what had occurred on the inside of this house. Another symbol in the story is the strand of hair. The strand of hair is a reminder of love lost and the often perverse things people do in their pursuit of happiness. The strand of hair also reveals the inner life of a woman who, despite her eccentricities, was committed to living life on her own terms and not submitting her behavior, no matter how shocking, to the approval of others. This is how she lived. She insisted to live that way, regardless of what people thought. Emily subscribes to her own moral code and occupies a world of her own invention, where even murder is allowed, is permissible. The narrator foreshadows the discovery of the long strand of hair on the pillow when he describes the physical transformation that Emily undergoes as she ages. Her hair grows more and more grizzled until it becomes a vigorous iron gray. The strand of hair ultimately stands as the last vestige of a life left to languish and decay, much like the body of Emily's former lover. So just like her former lover, she killed him and kept him in her bedroom. She is dead too, and she is kept in her house. She's still alive, she walks around, but she's really dead. So this is a brief, short analysis of the most important themes, the motives and the symbols in William Faulkner's A Rose for Emily. I hope you have found this story entertaining, instructive, provocative, and I hope it encourages you to go and read more of William Faulkner's writing. He's clearly a very provocative thinker and has a way of controlling the reader's attention that you don't see in other writers. Thank you very much, and hope to see you soon again.